Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Tobias Eigen, and I'm Community Builder for the Global Legal Empowerment Network. I'm pleased to be facilitating today's webinar. It's Tuesday, November 29th, and today we've come together to hear about how to use video to advance justice from our colleagues at Witness. Kelly Matheson will be presenting, and Lawrence Wolkamp and Lizzie Oshia will field your questions together with my network team colleagues Ashley Benueas and Michael Otto. Moderator team, maybe we can turn on our videos, our webcams for a moment and say hello. Hello, I'm Tobias Eigen. Welcome to the webinar. Kelly is here, and Michael. And Ashley has just come on as well.
Hello.
Anyone else? Lawrence and Lizzie, you want to unmute your microphones? Are you there? Or is it just the four of us that are here as staff right now? Looks like the rest of them are not on the organizer team. All right, well, this is just to give you all a picture of who we are. We don't want to take up too much bandwidth, so we'll turn off our webcams again. But this is the team. Before we get too far into today's proceedings, I have some brief housekeeping. Firstly, please take note that this event is being recorded, and we will share the full recording and highlights later on our website. I also want to make sure you can hear well and are able to use our webinar system. You should be able to see a questions pane where you can type in your questions and communicate with us. There's also a button for raising your hand to get our attention. What I wanted to ask everyone to do right now is to please go ahead and raise your hand on the control panel and demonstrate that you're able to use it. Okay, thank you, Dela. Thank you, Dan Sisse. Thank you, Andrew. Jesse, thank you. Kendra, Kunan, Anjala, thank you so much. Ted. That's fantastic. So it looks like most of you know how to find the hand raising feature. All right, Jackie, thank you. Okay, well, a handful of you have raised your hands, so I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and lower everyone's hands. So this is always something you can do if you want to get our attention. You can raise your hands, and that's good. All right, and at different points during the webinar, we'll be asking you to raise your hand. Now, if there's also a questions box, as you'll have seen in the control panel. Can you please type in what country you're coming from and maybe your organization in the questions box? This is a way to demonstrate that you're able to use the interface and also to let us get to know who's in the room. We'll take a moment for that. Great. Well, we have Elif Artan, sorry for the pronunciation, from Istanbul. Ted Johnson from Madagascar. Anjala from Kenya, from Witness. Jesse Landerman from the United States. Kendra Hughes from Canada, representing WeGo. Emmanuel. Yes, Emmanuel. We'll have participants are muted for now, but there'll be an opportunity later to unmute your microphone. Gareth Bennis from InsightShare in Oxford. Andrew from USAID in the United States. Abudo from Namati. Fatima from Nigeria. Welcome, Fatima. From the Isawali Empowerment Initiative. Abuda from Mozambique. Karen from the US, New Media Advocacy Project. Emmanuel from Uganda. So we have a really good group of people here. Fatmata from Sierra Leone, fellow Namati colleague. Welcome. Kunan from Mongolia, Ziauddin from sales in Bangladesh. Welcome, Zia. It's great to have a member of our Network Guidance Committee here. Hassan Sese from Sierra Leone. Excellent. All right, so I think we're...
Hi,
Go ahead.
This is Jackie and Laurence and Lizzie. We're here.
Oh, hi.
So we just wanted to say hi to everyone.
Great, great. Thanks for introducing yourselves. I'm glad to see you all are here as well. So we have quite an impressive team here from Witness, ready to field questions and support everyone who's here. So this is as well as a very impressive participant list. Thank you all so much for coming, and we're glad to have you here. So because many of you are not already members of the Global Legal Empowerment Network and may be learning about us for the first time, I wanted to say a few words. The network is a growing community of more than 800 organizations and 3,000 individuals from around the world who are working to advance justice in land rights, citizenship rights, right to health, education, and many other sectors where injustice unfortunately continues to persist. Members include human rights activists and grassroots organizers, advocates, educators, lawyers, community paralegals, researchers, policymakers, public servants. Through the network, these practitioners from all regions and disciplines are able to come together to collaborate and learn from each other. Both online and through in-person events, we share ideas, our challenges that we face, best practices, things that have worked well for us, and resources that we've developed through the course of our work. The main way that we connect is through an online discussion platform, which you can access from your laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Here we discuss problems and share ideas, solutions, and opportunities. We learn from each other through webinars like this one and in face-to-face learning exchanges, leadership courses, and other events, all of which we announce through the network discussion platform. Of course, Namati organizes events as well as the curators of the Global Legal Empowerment Network, but other members of the network also organize different opportunities and to partner and to convene for legal empowerment, and those opportunities also are featured through our discussion platform. The network also has an online library, resource library, which today has more than 1,000 free legal empowerment resources, such as training materials, monitoring and evaluation tools, case management forms, academic research, and much, much more. Last but not least, we also engage in advocacy. We work together to campaign on issues that affect us all globally and nationally, such as the campaign that helped to ensure the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals included a goal specifically on access to justice. Membership in the network is free and open to all. You just have to complete a sign-up form on our website and you're in. We'll be getting in touch with all webinar participants after the webinar with the link to invite you to join. Ashley, Michael, and I, and everyone on the network team are looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you to answer your questions and help you get set up in the network so you can start participating in support of your important work. So now that takes us to our featured presentation. I'm pleased to introduce Kelly Matheson. Kelly will speak for 20 minutes. For all of you, your task during these 20 minutes is to listen attentively and to watch the slides as they appear on your screen, but also to reflect on how this fits into your world and into your work, and to, as we move along, to type your questions into the questions pane. And as you saw, we have, excuse me, our webinar, our moderator team ready to field questions, and we're going to collect them all as we move along, and we'll do our very best to answer every question. And there will be time after the presentation to pose questions to Kelly directly, and time permitting, we can also give the floor to participants. So let us know via the questions pane if you'd also like to be unmuted and the question or topic that you'd like to talk about. Witness is an international human rights organization that uses video to change human rights practice, policy, and law. Kelly is a senior attorney and program manager heading up Witness's Video as Evidence program. Kelly, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Tobias, could you go to the third slide from the field? I want to actually start us off with a pop quiz, which I'm hoping will work over a webinar. What we're going to do is we're going to actually show a 30-second video. It doesn't have any sound, and as we watch it, I want you to think about which country this has been filmed in and what actually happened. And then Tobias, I can't see what comes up in the question box, but if you guys could write which country you think it's filmed in and what happened in the question box, then we'll see who got the answers right. Does that sound good? So let's play the video. Hopefully all of you can see this, but for those of you, if the internet connection is bad, what we're seeing is rubble. We're seeing bricks. I have a friend, Vincent, who works for the War Crimes Unit, and he feels that, oh, we can identify this just by the bricks. Is it already done? I think it's already done.
It's already done.
Actually,
well, let's continue.
Yeah, so it should be playing. So then you can see the trees in the background, and you can see the hillside. That should give you clues to possibly where it's at. You can see some of the architecture, and eventually, if it will continue to play, you'll be able to see a vehicle. All of those things will give you clues as to where this possibly might be. So if you guys could go ahead and take a guess. There's only 200 some odd countries in the world. Just take a guess as to where it might be and what happened. I'll give people a few seconds to do that. And Tobias, when you see answers pop up, can you tell me what they are?
I'm seeing Mexico, Palestine, a civil war, Mexico, Central African Republic, Syria.
Great. I'll just stop there. For anybody who guessed Iran, that was the right answer as far as location. And for anybody who guessed that an earthquake had happened, that is the right answer. And quite honestly, when I show videos like this, no one, or very, very rarely do people get this right. But I show these videos, and we show these videos to make a really super important point. Videos can tell us that something is wrong. We can see, obviously, that something is wrong in this village. But if we don't capture it, contextualize it, organize, and protect it properly, then video isn't actually going to be very helpful in helping us determine what happened to who and when. So what I want to do next is tell the backstory of how the Video's Evidence program got started, and then we're going to dive into the substance. So very briefly, I'm going to take us to the MENA region. And Tobias, could you forward the slide for me? And start there. So basically, back in 2011, we were working with activists throughout the MENA region, and they were documenting using video to try and show the world what was happening throughout the region, all the human rights violations that were taking place. But especially in places like Syria, the world was completely burying its head and not paying any attention and not taking any action. So by 2013, our colleagues in the Middle East asked us, hey, could you help us document for long-term justice and accountability? So we would enter rooms and do trainings And during the trainings, we would have lawyers sitting on one side of the room and activists sitting on the other side of the room. And the activists would be saying to the lawyers, hey, we're going out, we're documenting all of the human rights violations that are happening. We're doing this, risking our own personal lives, our own personal security, the security of our families, and we're coming back, we're giving you this footage, and you, lawyers, are not using this footage. And the lawyers are saying to the activists, hey, we completely understand that you guys are going out and risking your lives to collect this valuable footage, but the footage you're collecting isn't valuable. And it isn't valuable because so much of the footage looks like that video we just saw. You can't tell where it was shot, you can't tell what is actually wrong, and you just don't have a lot of information from it. So what was happening at the same exact time is the International Criminal Court was saying out loud, we are really highly dependent on people on the ground. So basically everybody on this webinar, the International Criminal Court needs everybody to start collecting information about human rights violations, whether it's video or whether it's physical evidence or witness testimonies, because courts like the International Criminal Court, they don't come in until years or even months after a crime has been committed. And at that point, the evidence is deteriorated or gone. And we're hearing this over and over again from commissions of inquiries, lawyers in Brazil, courts in Brazil. Even last week I was in Geneva and the head of the Committee Against Torture basically said we really need people on the ground to be doing this documentation so that we can eventually hold perpetrators accountable for crimes they've committed, or in other cases free people who have been falsely accused. So what we started doing, Tobias, could you forward this slide for me? Is we started drafting guidance to help NGOs on the ground and activists on the ground, journalists on the ground, so that the video that people do in fact risk their lives to collect has legal evidentiary value, so that it's basically trial ready. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take a peek inside that guide and our goals, which are on the next slide. Can we go to the next slide? The goals for today are to basically consider how video can support justice and accountability and how to turn video information into video documentation and evidence, and then we're going to go ahead and learn more. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump to how to turn video information into video documentation. Can we go to the next slide? Great. Okay, so actually, can we go one more forward? Thank you. So it doesn't matter where you live around the world. There's different words for it in different jurisdictions, but basically in order for video to become trial ready, for it to be usable in a court of law, it has to be two things. One, it has to be reliable, and two, it has to be relevant. First, we're going to talk a little bit about reliability, which is really just about techniques. And then we're going to talk a little bit about relevancy, which is actually what you put in the camera's frame. It's the content of where you choose to point your camera. So when it comes to relevancy, when it comes to reliability, can we go to the next slide? Reliability is really just about camera technique. So you have to think about how you're going to film the video. You have to think about setting the time and information on your phone properly so it collects data about time and date properly. You have to think about things like filming the weather so that someone from sitting at a distance can actually look, if the date says November 1st and the weather is sunny outside, and then they go into the historic weather patterns and the weather is rainy, then they know it wasn't actually filmed on November 1st. So that is, if you film the weather, it's a good way to verify things. If you film landmarks, it's a good way for it to verify things. So one of the things that we do is we teach people how to film so that that video can be easily verified. Tobias, can we go ahead and go to slide number 11 and play the video starting at 45 seconds? There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and talk over while we're playing this video. For those of you, hopefully everyone can see it, but this is a short 4-minute long video that teaches people on the ground how to film a crime scene. So the first thing is to add information to the video, key information, just about the videographer's name, the date, the time, so that someone sitting at a distance, if they're sitting in Brussels or in Geneva or New York City, they could actually verify it. Then the next thing is to film an overview shot with the horizon in it, so you can see the weather pattern, so you can start seeing landmarks. Oops. And then we're on the wrong video right now. Can we go back? So
apologies, guys. I'm unable to mute the video and unmute you. So let me just try that again. I did it wrong a moment ago. So I'll go back to 45. What was it? 45?
Well, no, we're on the wrong video, so we have to go back a slide.
Okay, this is the one.
You know what?
All right, let's go back in 45 seconds.
Yeah, let's not worry about playing it. And I'll just leave it at the point is we basically have guidance.
I can do it. I can mute it. I just realized I was muting it the wrong way. So let me go ahead and play it, and I'll mute it first. Here.
Okay.
All right. And off it goes. So you should go ahead and be able to keep talking.
Okay. So so this video basically is a 4-minute video. So very quickly, it walks you through how to film a crime scene, and it walks you through how professional investigators film a crime scene. So they add essential information about the person, about the filmmaker's name. They add the time, the date. They show the weather. They show landmarks. They show the angle of the sun compared to the landscape. And then the first thing they start out doing is actually a 360-degree pan, as you can hopefully see in the video. And this isn't a shot that if you're just making an average film, this isn't a shot you would take. It's very slow, and it's not something you would ever put inside a movie. It's not something that would be shown on the nightly news, but it's very important when it comes to crime scene videography. Tobias, can we skip 2 slides ahead now? So next one, and play this video, and we can mute that too. So this is actually a video that was taken by a crime scene investigator in the former Yugoslavia. And this video was actually used in court. It's a crime scene video. As essential evidence to help convict a war criminal named Dokmanovic. I'm not going to go into the backstory of it, but I just wanted to show the video to show how slowly the 360 pan is done, how it's, again, really super boring footage that wouldn't be seen on the nightly news. But this piece of video footage played a critical role in actually convicting a war criminal. So can we go ahead and go to the next slide? Okay, and one more forward. Okay, great. So reliability, again, goes back to how you film. It's going to go back to how you save your files, how you organize it, how you archive it, and how you preserve it. So the next thing I want to touch on is relevancy. And relevancy is simply about what you decide to put in your camera's frame. Can we go to the next slide? So the key point here is that lawyers have to prove 3 different things in order to hold someone accountable for a crime. And what we call this is the anatomy of a crime. Can we go to the next slide? Once you have an idea of who the suspect is, who you believe committed that crime, then the lawyer has to prove what crime he or she committed. Potentially, if that crime is an international crime or whether it's just a standard crime, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then they also have to prove how the person committed the crime, and the legal term for that is motive liability. Can we go to the next slide? So when we think about what happened, your base crime is just your typical violation. It's murder, torture, rape, use of excessive force, property damage, election fraud. It's what we think about when we think about a crime being committed. Can we go to the next slide? Then an international crime is a crime that would be prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. And that means that your murder it's aggravated, right? It's bigger. It's either a war crime, a crime against humanity, or genocide. So if a lawyer wants to prove murder as a war crime, they're going to have to prove murder, and they're going to have to prove the war crime. And I'll get to an example of that in a minute. And then can we go to the next slide? In addition to proving the crime and the international context of the crime, a lawyer has to prove how a person committed a crime. And by that, there's different ways to commit a crime, in that a person can pull the trigger, him or herself, or what they could do is they could order their troops to pull the trigger. Or, for example, they could aid and abet the crime, which means perhaps providing the getaway car or providing military equipment for the bombing. So they didn't actually order the crime or commit the crime themselves, but they provided something essential so that that crime could happen. And so a lawyer has to prove all of these things to hold someone accountable. And oftentimes in the field, the activists are really focused on proving the base crime. When we see the police officer doing the beating, or we see troops coming in and pillaging places, that's where we focus our camera. But it's really, really key for all of us to learn that we also have to focus our camera on the motive liability. And so I'm going to tell us a quick story about that, and then we're going to end with questions. So can we go to the next slide? Actually, can we go to slide number 23 all the way to the field note? Okay, so there's a gentleman, his name is El Mahdi, and back in the summer of 2012, there was a rebel group that took control of Timbuktu in Mali. And El Mahdi was in charge of what was called the Morality Brigade. And this brigade was set up to uphold virtue and prevent vice. And what this Morality Brigade did is that they went around Timbuktu and they destroyed cultural, historic, and religious property from the 15th, 16th, and 12th centuries in Timbuktu. In January of 2013, the International Criminal Court came in and started an investigation 6 months later. And they collected video from a variety of media outlets, from a variety of journalists, that helped prove that El Mahdi was ahead of this brigade, that he participated in these crimes, and that he actually knew exactly what he was doing. So I want to go to the next slide. So when when lawyers go to prove a crime, they don't just prove destruction of historic and cultural property. What they do is they break down every single crime that they prove into what's called elements. And some of those elements are about what physically happened. The perpetrator directed an attack, for example, in number 1. And some of those elements are what the perpetrator knew. So let's look at number 5. The perpetrator was aware of the factual circumstances that established the existence of a conflict. So if you look at this elements chart, the lawyers have to prove all 10 of those things, one at a time. Theoretically, if you don't prove all 10 elements beyond a reasonable doubt, the person should be allowed to go free. So what I want to quickly do is look at how video can prove each and every one of these individual elements. So let's go to the first video. Okay. So we're going to mute this video and we're going to play it, and hopefully it'll play, and I'll talk and tell you what we're seeing. But the International Criminal Court, one of the things they had to prove is that these buildings were in fact religious buildings, that they were in fact destroyed, and that they were not military objects. So the International Criminal Court used video from the journalists that the journalists collected, and they paired it with video of these historic and religious buildings beforehand, and then they showed the destruction happening, and then they showed the crime scene afterwards. So now we're actually seeing the buildings being physically destroyed. And this was direct evidence presented in court in order to prove that El Mahdi was participating in the physical destruction of these buildings. Tobias, can we go to the next video? So another thing that the lawyers had to prove is that El Mahdi knew that these buildings were historic and cultural objects. And sometimes it's really, really, really hard to use video to show what people were thinking. But in this case, El Mahdi went on camera with the journalists, and he said out loud that he knew that these buildings were significant cultural sites. There are several quotes, but for example, he said that about one of the mosques, quote, "It's probably the oldest mosque here in town and is considered a heritage site, a World Heritage Site." So the prosecutors at the International Criminal Court played video clip after video clip after video clip showing El Mahdi admitting that he knew that these were cultural and religious sites and that he intended to destroy them. Can we go ahead and go to the next clip? Another part that the International Criminal Court had to prove was that these crimes happened during war, because otherwise it's just destruction of cultural property. But if you show that it was happening during an armed conflict, it is a more egregious crime. So they use video clips of military uniforms, of weapons, of flags, of a bank building that was turned into a military station. There's the bank building. And they showed all of this along with El Mahdi speaking about how he knew that the troops had taken over this town to prove that El Mahdi had committed these crimes in the context of war. And can we go then to the next slide? So I think this is a little bit hard to, hopefully it's okay. Hopefully everyone understands and I can answer questions because it's a little hard to explain in this format. But the take-home point here is that the prosecutor at the International Criminal Court used video to help him prove each and every single element of the crime. And so when you're thinking about filming, a very key thing to do is work with a lawyer, write down the elements of the crime, and figure out which shots, what you can put in your frame to help the lawyer prove those elements of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. If you do that, it's going to ensure that you don't waste your time going out and filming. You don't risk your personal security capturing information that isn't relevant or that is duplicative. And it's going to make your time that you spend in the field and any money you spend in the field much more efficient and make it a lot easier for a lawyer to successfully prosecute someone in court. Can we go to the next slide? In this particular case, El-Mahdi actually pled guilty given all of the evidence against him, and he was sentenced very recently to 9 years in jail by the judges at the International Criminal Court. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and see what questions have come up, because that was a lot of information in a short period of time, and hopefully most of it makes sense.
That was great, Kelly. Thank you so much. That made a lot of sense to me. I apologize for the delays here and there with advancing slides and showing the video. I hope that all came across okay to everyone. So now is a good time, if you haven't yet, to go to the questions pane and add your questions. And I will just be checking with our team to see what questions have already been coming in. There are a few. Just a moment. So while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, here's one that I thought would be worth sharing. Kelly, is there anything different about using videos for campaigns or storytelling versus video for use in legal cases? And then also, is it okay to share videos that you want to use as evidence before you actually use them in court?
Okay, so regarding the question about a difference between using videos for story and using videos for evidence, there can be, but there doesn't necessarily have to be. And by that, I mean, oftentimes we go out into the field because we are creating a story about an issue that's happening on the ground in order to move people to act, in order to change behavior, to change policy. We're going out and collecting that video purely for story purposes. For example, in the El-Mahdi case, the journalists that were collecting all that video, they did not go out intending to collect documentation that was going to eventually be used in the International Criminal Court. In the El-Mahdi case, they went out to tell a story about the cultural destruction that was happening in Timbuktu. As journalists, because they're used to, they have professional filmmaking skills, and they archive and protect their footage very well. The International Criminal Court was actually able to then turn around and use that video footage for evidence. So that was actually an ideal scenario, right? The video was used as both a storytelling mechanism, as media advocacy to alert the world that was going on, and then it was also used as damning evidence in a court of law. Sometimes, however, the security situation is such that you don't actually want to, and this gets into the sharing, you don't actually want to collect video footage that is going to be shared publicly because it's too dangerous. But you do want to collect it for long-term justice and accountability. So you go out, you collect it, ideally to a trial-ready standard, you save it, and then you share it when it makes most strategic sense. And the key lesson that we teach about sharing is that if you do have really, really damning footage, really important footage, that you press the pause button and you think, what should I do with this? Should I share it publicly because it's important that this gets out right away? Should I hold on to it and wait a little while until I share it because it would potentially threaten someone's security or even your own security? A classic example of that is on the police violence front. I don't know how many of you will remember, but in South Carolina, a police officer shot a man in the back. His name was Walter Scott. And the police officer shot him in the back 8 times as the man was running away at full speed from him. The filmmaker, his name was Phelim Santana, he actually went to the police station to turn over that footage. And he got a sinking feeling in his stomach, like the police weren't going to do the right thing. So he actually turned around and walked away and did not hand that footage over to the police. Instead, he went to the family and said, I have footage that I think you should see. The family gave it to their lawyer, and then the lawyer basically said, you know what, we're not going to release this footage unless the police come out with an official statement denying what happened. And that's precisely what happened. The police lied about what had gone down. As soon as that official statement was on the record, as soon as the police officer had written down his side of the story, the New York Times released the footage of what actually happened, and this police officer was caught in a lie. So not only is he in trouble now for the murder of this man named Walter Scott, but he's also in trouble for perjuring himself and lying. And so it might be really, really, really important to hold on to footage sometimes and not share it right away. And that's the big lesson, but there's a lot of details we could dive in onto that too.
That's a really good explanation. Thank you so much. Another question we just received was, how do you distinguish the real record from made-up things? It seems possible that smart people could use Photoshop to produce fake videos.
Yeah, that's such a really good and important question. When it comes to videos, there's a tremendous amount of troubles in verifying videos. There's 3 main problems. 1, that the video is faked, completely reenacted. 2, the video is miscontextualized, meaning that you post it and it's actually from Mexico in 2011, but someone says this is from Syria in 2013. So it's actually real video, but it has false information posted with it. And then there's another problem of video that is real video. It hasn't been manipulated in any way, shape, or form, but it just doesn't have enough information. Like that very first video we saw. You see it and you have absolutely no idea what it is. So if there is a video, let's say you find it on YouTube and you think that this could be really helpful to support your work. If the video hasn't been shot properly, hasn't been contextualized properly, hasn't been archived properly, you as an advocate could spend 5 days, 5 weeks, possibly 5 years trying to verify that piece of video footage. And sometimes you just can't verify it at all, and you can't use it. But there are a bunch of techniques out there. The really great groups to work with are Bellingcat. They have a lot of case studies. Storyful has a lot of case studies on how someone who just unearths a piece of video on YouTube that they think is important to their work can actually use a bunch of different tools to verify it. Tools such as Google reverse image search, or historical weather data, or Google Earth, things like that. And I can direct people to a bunch of case studies on that if people like. Now,
Kelly, that kind of leads to another question. I guess maybe you partially answered it as somebody asked. Can video from anyone be used as evidence? I guess you've kind of answered that question, right? It can be if you're able to use these tools to verify the source and
Exactly.
the video.
Yep, as long as the video can be verified, then video can be used whether it comes from a CCC TV camera, from a dash cam, from a journalist, or from a citizen on the ground.
Awesome.
And different
Okay.
courts have different standards.
And then there's a question here from Ted. Is continuous video better than multiple short videos?
Absolutely, because a continuous video, there's two reasons. A video that's edited, short clip after short clip after short clip, each one of those individual clips has to be verified, and that takes a lot more time. And then if there's gaps in the footage, the other side can say, hey, but we don't know what happened when the camera was turned off. And then they can fix their story so that it fits. So when the camera was turned off, they can make up something that happened, for lack of a better way of saying it. So it's much better if it's continuous.
Okay. Up next, Abdullah Tami asks, what does the videographer do to ensure their personal safety and security?
Oh my gosh. It depends, the big answer is it depends. It depends on it depends on the situation. It depends on the country. It depends on the amount of freedom of speech and expression that someone has. So the key is to put together a security plan based on time, date, and location of where you're at in your situation, to stick with that security plan, to be sure that that security plan doesn't just protect you as the filmer, but protects the people who are being filmed as well as the community, to ideally work with someone who specializes in that. So for example, in Brazil, we work with Article 19 because they specialize in protection. And then just commit to being safe and commit to being ethical and commit to not sharing that video footage publicly if it is going to hurt anyone. There's also steps you can take, like blurring out someone's image before you share it. You can also film with anonymity by holding up a slate instead of using your voice or using your face. And with that, so there's a bunch of different techniques you can use to stay safer.
There's a question here from Hassan. How can videos obtained be effectively handled for advocacy for a systemic change without having it leak out before they're released?
So I think the question is about keeping the video embargoed until you're ready to release it.
That sounds about right, yeah.
So, I mean, the key there is just making sure that if you're doing an advocacy video and you don't want it leaked, a really good example is a video that we did in Kenya on indigenous land rights. We actually couldn't have the video leaked because it was being presented at court in front of the African Commission of Human and People's Rights. So obviously you have to trust the filmmaker. You have to trust everyone in the line that's handling the film, the editor, etc. You ideally will keep it on encrypted drives. Ideally, you will be able to keep it in a safe location. And I know that these things don't always exist. But so you have to think basically about a safety and security plan for that footage, right? And then you have to make sure that you trust the people in line, and then keep it embargoed until you're ready to release it. In the Samurai case, it had all the video footage, the video evidence had to stay embargoed until a final decision was made by the court. And in that case, it was successful. But we also do have to realize that if video footage is out there on a phone, on a hard drive, etc., it can be stolen and it could be leaked. So it's definitely a risk that we're going to have to run. Still there?
Yeah, still here. There's a lot of questions coming in. Thank you all so much for your questions. Zia Udin has asked about GPS. Is video acceptable as evidence without GPS information?
Yep, it depends on the, I mean, GPS information is definitely going to strengthen your video, but if you can prove its location, for example, by using landmarks or using buildings or using the weather, using some other way of corroborating that location, it can definitely be accepted without GPS. But if you have GPS available, you might as well add that GPS to it because it'll just make it stronger and it'll just make it easier to use in court.
Great. Thank you for that. Another question from Ted. Is there a way to protect the forensic data of a video file, the metadata, so that it is less likely to have its authenticity challenged? For example, if there's a long, boring lead up, is it better to not trim that from the file or to convert it from one format to another?
There's two tools out there. One is called Camera V and one is called Eyewitness to Atrocities, and they're actually apps that put a hash over your metadata. And by that, it's basically like a signature or a watermark or like a wax seal. And if anyone manipulates in any way, shape, or form that metadata or that file, even 1 pixel, those two apps will be able to pick it up because that hash will change. So if you really need to have, it's a way of proving that the video hasn't been manipulated. The other way of proving it would be to, you can hire someone that's a digital forensics person, and that obviously gets time consuming and it gets financially challenging, of course, as well. So in that case, you're only going to want to hire someone if it's really that smoking gun evidence. But if you want to protect stuff from the get-go, you can go to one of those camera apps that puts one of those hashes over it. As far as cutting off the long, boring intro, keep it. If you think that this video could be used for long-term justice and accountability, keep the original file name, protect it exactly as is. If you want to use it for advocacy, put it on a different hard drive and edit it as much as you want, but definitely keep a backup of the original file.
Okay, thank you for that. There was a question about filming people without their permission. What's the best approach for that?
These are really good questions. In the Videos Evidence Field Guide, there is actually a section on informed consent, because that's what we're talking about. And the best practice and the guidance in basically the entire human rights field is don't film people if you don't have their full informed consent. The reality is that we often know that that's not possible in the situations where many of us work, because either bullets are flying or you're on the run or the situation is insecure. So there are many, many, many reasons why you might capture people on camera and not have their informed consent. In the Videos Evidence Guide, there is actually a checklist, and it gives ideas of when you can't secure informed consent, when it's just not possible to do that, here's some things you should think about. So I would recommend to everyone going into the Videos Evidence Field Guide, going into the interviewing section, reading the section on informed consent, and possibly the checklist is also in a mini guide form. It's in a basically a postcard that you can take to the field, and those are the things you should think about when in deciding whether to press record when you don't have informed consent or not. And then there's a section in the Videos Evidence Field Guide on ethical curation. So then the second question is, well, now you have this footage, should I or should I not share it? And that entire section is about determining whether or not video footage should or could be shared when you don't have fully informed consent. So that's the very short answer, but we could literally talk about that for a week. It's a really important question.
And a very good answer. So we had another kind of technical question from Emmanuel. It's kind of two maybe related questions. The first is in situations where video is not possible, can audio files be regarded as sufficient? It's kind of part one. And then part two is, are video simulations okay as well to adduce evidence, a term that I'm not really familiar with, and so that you can kind of exactly mix and match the data and create your own crime scene or your own presentation of what happened when there are gaps in the video evidence.
First question regarding audio. No, that's a really good question too. Audio, absolutely, it can be enough. Like, look back on the Rwandan genocide case, where the radio broadcasters were basically inciting genocide, and audio clip after audio clip after audio clip after audio clip was used in that court case to convict two of the members of the radio station in Rwanda of incitement to genocide. In the Almaty case that we talked about a little bit, they actually used video broadcasts captured by journalists, and they also used radio broadcasts. Also, audio, even when you're filming, if you can hear the shelling, sometimes people who are experts can hear what type of guns, so to speak, are being fired, or what types of tanks are being used in the background. So audio is essential. And if you just have audio, it's potentially could be as damning as video, depending upon the situation. Regarding simulations, there are actually companies, I know in the United States and I'm sure throughout the world, that specialize in courtroom presentation. So even if it's not, video evidence, video that wasn't captured in the field, they will actually create a simulation of this is what we believe happened. This is a model of what the crime scene looks like. And these simulations can be really, really, really important for judges who are far removed from the scene to understand exactly what's happening. Let's think about in Latin America or in Africa, where there's a lot of environmental destruction. If you can use a simulation to show, for example, an oil spill and how it ended up blowing up and then flowing throughout the sea and then injured all of the mangrove forests and then in turn damming then in turn affecting a whole entire community. You can't necessarily show that with a video. You could show bits and pieces of it, but you could use a simulation and then you could incorporate real video from the ground to make a really compelling story so that judge could really understand what's happening on the ground and really understand what's happening to these communities. It's used all the time in courtrooms throughout the world. Generally, you have to pay a lot to get these companies to do it. And to my knowledge, there is no NGO, there's no NGO that's supporting folks like us on this call to actually do those simulations. So if anyone would like to start up that NGO, I think it'd be a great idea.
Great, well, thank you. I think with that, I think we are just about reaching the end of the formal part of our webinar. We've had a great presentation from Kelly. Thank you so much. And we've had a lot of excellent questions. Thank you, everyone, for asking the questions. And thank you, network team and witness team, for fielding the questions and helping to select the ones that we posed to Kelly. I think we've learned a lot today about using video as evidence. And it's been a pleasure to have this exchange with you all and this exchange of information and questions. As I said at the start, the Global Legal Empowerment Network is open to all and membership is free. Please log in as soon as you can so we can also start learning from you and introduce you to our community. and keep the conversation going there. The link to log in is namati.org, namati.org. And you can also immediately tell us what you're working on, challenges you're facing, potential opportunities for collaboration that you might be offering or seeking with fellow practitioners in the network. As a next step, we are going to be writing up a summary of today's webinar, and in particular, the questions and answers that were covered after the feature presentation. But we'll also be sharing the full recording of the presentation, and also sharing contact details. As you can see on the screen, there's some email addresses there and website links that you can copy down. And we'll also share all of those by email with you all after the webinar is concluded. So with that, I'm going to thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording, and anyone who wants to stay on for a bit longer, and we can stay on and continue the conversation. So once again, thank you all for joining us for this webinar, and I'm stopping the recording now.